Hope, Luna had learned, was not a light that appeared all at once, but a discipline of tiny refusals. Refusing to forget her name when the market called her girl. Refusing to bow her head so low she could no longer see exits. Refusing to accept that cruelty was law simply because powerful men said it was. Under Duskwalker territory, in the wet stone lungs of the night market warrens, that discipline was the only wealth she owned. It kept her breathing through hunger, through orders barked like kicks, through nights when the walls sweated cold and the chains on the storage gates sang every time someone pulled one open. The warrens stank of lamp oil, old rain, and fear disguised as vinegar and spice. Above ground, pack banners flew over carved gates and cedar halls. Below, the market moved on bent backs and silence. Luna carried crates, scrubbed blood from butcher drains, and sorted ledgers she was never allowed to read in full. A black brand curved over her left shoulder blade, an old servant sigil burned there when she was 14 and sold to settle a debt she had not made. Every overseer touched that scar when they wanted obedience. Every buyer checked it first, as if the mark told the truth of her soul. By the end of that week, her knuckles were split from lye water and her right ankle throbbed from a dropped barrel. She still moved quickly. Slowness invited attention, and attention invited punishment. "Keep your eyes down," Overseer Halveth snapped when she passed the counting table. He was broad, gray at the temples, and wore keys on his belt like trophies. "You are here to carry, not to think." Luna set down a sack of dried roots and kept her voice even. "Yes, Overseer." A younger guard laughed. "She answers too clean for stock." Halveth caught her chin between two fingers, forcing her face up. "Stock is exactly what you are. Disposable if spoiled." She held still until he let go. Her heartbeat pounded at her throat, but she did not flinch. Men like Halveth mistook fear for consent. She had no intention of giving him either. Near midnight, a runner in travel leathers arrived through the East Crawl Tunnel, mud to his knees and a hollow moon pin hidden under his cloak clasp. Luna noticed because she noticed everything that might one day become an escape route, a threat, or proof. A second man joined him in the candle alcove behind the ledger stacks, where servants were forbidden to linger. Halveth waved her toward the alcove with a jerk of two fingers. "Take this tray, wine, then leave." She carried the tray into shadow and lowered it to a crate. The men did not stop speaking. They did not look at her. To them, she was floor tile with hands. "The payment is secured," the runner said. "Valewood wants confirmation tonight." The second man, older with council braid wrapped at his wrist, replied, "You will have it." Brennan asked for blood he can prove. "We found the line where records were erased. She is the last royal vein." Luna's fingers tightened on the tray so hard the metal edge cut her palm. The runner's voice thinned into excitement. "Then the right can proceed at Eclipse." "At Eclipse," the older man agreed. "Transfer her through servant routes at dawn 2 days from now. No public chains. Keep the stock calm. If she scars, he deducts." Stock. She recognized the term. She also recognized the older man's signet pressed into wax on market writs, the one that moved people like grain sacks through hidden contracts. Council-linked, protected. They finally noticed her. The older man smiled without warmth. "You heard nothing." Luna bowed. "Nothing, sir." "Good girl," he said. She walked out without spilling the wine. Her legs nearly gave once she turned the corner. In the storage corridor, she pressed her bleeding palm to her mouth and breathed around the copper taste. Last royal vein. The phrase hammered through her like a second pulse. She had grown up with half-truths, with a dead mother no one named in full, with records that vanished whenever she asked for birth rolls. She had told herself ancestry did not matter. Survival did. Tonight, survival and ancestry had collided, and men were already pricing the collision. Now she thought in hard, bright fragments. urgency striking like flint. If she stayed, they would package her. If she asked for help, it would go to the same table where they had sold her the first time. If she waited for dawn, she would become cargo with wrists. She knew these tunnels better than they did. She knew where the sluice grates stuck after rain and which guards drank themselves dull during last bell. She was not strong enough to fight 6 armed hunters, but she was fast when fear turned into direction. She had one body and one chance. Move now, move quiet. Do not ask permission to live. She stole 3 things from the infirmary shelf: a bandage roll, a tin of lampblack, and a fist-sized pouch of silver salt meant for sterilizing blades. From the kitchen she took stale bread and a skin of water. She rubbed lampblack across the pale skin of her throat and hands, wrapped her ankle tight, and waited in the coal chute until the bell marked shift turn. When Halveth's keys rattled away from the north corridor, she slipped through the laundry tunnel, crawled on elbows through a limestone throat that smelled of mold, and dropped into the tannery yard outside the formal market ring. Rain had started above, a fine cold sheet needling down through grates. Good. Rain blurred scent trails. She made the first gate. She made the second. At the third, a horn note split the night behind her, low and rising, not a fire signal. Hunt call. Boots pounded stone. Someone shouted, "Warren stock loose, black brand, left shoulder, alive for transfer." Luna ran. The yard opened into a service lane between curing racks. Wolf-hide sheets snapped on lines like dark sails. She ducked under one, vaulted a drainage trough, and veered toward the river stairs. 2 hunters dropped from the upper catwalk blocking the path. Both wore gray cloaks with no house crest, only the hollow moon pin at the throat. "Easy," one said, drawing a short blade dusted white at the edge. "Silver." "No need to make it hurt." The second circled left. "Brennan pays more if she can walk." Fear sharpened everything, rain striking iron, leather creaking as one hunter shifted weight, the burn in her lungs, the ache in her branded shoulder where memory rose like nausea. Collar buckle, auction lamp, a hand on her neck telling her stillness was virtue. She backed toward the wall until damp stone met her spine. No exit, no witness she could trust. Then a new scent cut through wet metal and wolf hide, cedar smoke and cold air after lightning. A man vaulted the wall to her right and landed between her and the hunters with a softness that did not match his size. He wore dark travel leathers. No crown, no ceremonial mantle, only a wolf head signet at his wrist and authority that made the lane itself seem to brace. Eric Duskwalker. Luna had seen him only from a distance at tax assemblies, a figure on a dais while servants lined the walls. Up close, he looked less like a throne and more like a storm held in human shape. Rain ran down his jaw. Amber bled into his irises, predator rising close beneath the surface. The hunters hesitated, then lunged together. Eric moved first, fast and efficient, disarming one with a twist that sent the silver blade skidding. He drove the other back against a rack post. The clash lasted seconds. All impact and controlled force. No theatrical cruelty, only necessity. One hunter broke and fled toward the gate. Eric's voice cracked across the lane. "Seal the lower yards." Shouts answered from unseen sentries. Luna turned to run in the opposite direction. A hand caught her wrist, firm but not crushing. She jerked hard, panic detonating. "Do not touch me." His grip loosened instantly. "Trackers are closing. Listen to me." "I am done listening to men with ranks." "Then hear this as fact, not order." "They have your scent." She tried to wrench free again. He stepped in, eyes locked on hers, expression grim with calculation and something like regret. "This will hurt," he said. Then he bit her at the juncture of neck and shoulder, quick and precise, teeth-piercing skin long enough to seal, to overwrite the drifting trail rain could not erase. Heat surged through her body with the shock, followed by a dizzying pull she did not understand and did not want. She shoved him away, breath ragged, palm pressed to the fresh wound. Rage steadied her more than fear. "You branded me. I hid you from them. With your claim." "With my protection," he said, voice rough, "not ownership." In Luna's life, those words had never meant different things. By dawn, she sat alone in an unused washroom in the lower keep, shivering in a borrowed shirt, staring at the swollen crescent mark at her shoulder. She opened the silver salt pouch with shaking fingers. Pain was familiar. Better chosen pain than a chain disguised as rescue. She cut the new bite open with a sterilized needle and the edge of a silvered shaving blade, hissing through clenched teeth as salt hit raw skin. Tears came, and she ignored them. Blood spotted the cloth she pressed to the wound, bright against white linen. She wrapped the ruined cloth around the wolf head signet she had taken from the basin where Eric's gear had been laid after the skirmish, then walked to the war room while the keep changed shifts. No one stopped a servant carrying laundry. She set the bundle in the center of his map table, directly over the Boundary River line. At first light, she crossed that same river alone, water up to her thighs, current dragging at numb legs, rain turning to mist over the stones. Behind her, the Duskwalker horns began to sound, one gate after another, a chain of iron notes sealing the territory she had just left. Luna did not look back again. The horns rolled across the river valley in iron waves while she fought the current. One step, then another. Boots scraping slick stone until her knees hit the far bank, and she crawled through reeds bent flat by rain. Her shoulder burned where she had cut the bite open, and the salt she had poured into it still lived there like ground glass. She kept moving anyway, palms sinking into mud, breath sawing her throat raw, because stopping felt too close to surrender, and surrender had always come dressed as reason. Beyond the reed bed, the land lifted into a narrow birch ridge threaded with an old Carter road. She recognized it from contraband maps passed between kitchen girls and whispers. North led to neutral ferry posts, south curved back toward Duskwalker patrol lanes, and the center cut through a dead customs station nobody used after the landslide season. She chose north and limped hard, pressing blood-soaked linen to her shoulder with one hand while the other steadied her against wet trunks. By mid-morning, the rain softened from needles to drifting mist, but that mercy came with scent. Wet earth, river rot, distant wood smoke, and beneath it a bitter tang that made the fine hairs along her arms rise. Wolfsbane. Not fresh blossom, not a pouch at someone's belt, but powdered residue carried on leather and wagon cloth. She dropped behind a fallen log just as a two-wagon caravan creaked into view on the lower road, tarps tied like refugee cover, oxen slow and dull-eyed. 4 walkers flanked it in patched cloaks. No crest, no spoken route call. One of them touched his throat where a pin sat hidden under fabric, the same careless gesture she had seen in the Warrens. Her stomach turned cold. She stayed flat in the mud until the caravan passed, then counted to 50 with her cheek against bark and moved again, faster now, reckless with urgency. Branches whipped her face. Her wrapped ankle buckled once and nearly sent her down the slope. She caught herself on a stump and almost laughed at the absurdity of it, because her body felt assembled from borrowed parts and sheer refusal. Run now. Breathe now. Think later. Keep to the ridge where wagons cannot follow. Do not cough. Do not cry. If they catch me, I become a package again, a number on a ledger with a pulse attached. I am not cargo. I am not stock. I am a woman with a name and a spine and a mouth that can still say no. If I reach the ferry, I can trade labor for passage. If I reach any pack gate not tied to Brennan, I can vanish into kitchens and cellars and start over with my head down and my back unbroken. I can survive this hour, then the next, then the next. That is all survival has ever been. Not rescue. Sequence. The ridge ended at a stone outpost half swallowed by ivy, one tower and a collapsed gatehouse, old border architecture from before the treaty roads were rebuilt. Relief hit too hard and too fast. She stumbled into the yard, searching for a cistern or even a dry corner, and did not see the movement at the parapet until a warning shout cracked above her. Hands clear. Step away from your belt. 3 sentries descended the stairs in wolf-gray cloaks, blades low, disciplined spacing that spoke of training and trust. Duskwalker colors, though the insignia was the newer crown wolf crest she had only seen on tax seals. The tallest, a woman with braided black hair and a scar across her chin, kept her point angled to the ground instead of at Luna's throat. It was a small thing. It felt enormous. Luna lifted both hands and swayed. I have no weapon. Name, the woman said. Luna hesitated. Names got people sold. Silence got them beaten. The old arithmetic clenched her chest. Luna, she managed. A younger guard moved to her blind side, sniffed once, then stiffened. Captain Nara. She reeks of wolfsbane and silver. And alpha scent. The yard went still. Nara's eyes narrowed, not cruel, simply sharp. Who marked you? Luna's laugh came out ragged. A king who says he does not own people. That answer will get you killed in the wrong camp. Then choose this camp carefully. For one suspended beat, Nara looked almost impressed. Then Luna's vision blurred at the edges, black spots rising like crows, and the ground tilted violently. She hit one knee, then both. The world narrowed to wet stone beneath her fingers and bootsteps rushing toward her. Hold pressure on that shoulder, Nara ordered. Joran, fetch the healer satchel. Mikal, signal Lower Valley Patrol and tell them we have a live target tied to the Hollow Moon roots. Move. A cloth pressed to Luna's wound. Hands turned her gently enough to keep the bleeding from restarting in a sheet. She fought on instinct, weak and furious, but her arms would not answer. You're safe for the next minute, Nara said near her ear, voice unexpectedly steady. After that, we negotiate. Luna wanted to spit out that safety was a word men used while locking doors. Instead, she tasted iron and rain and a sharp herbal draft from the satchel as someone uncorked tincture. The younger guard swore under his breath. Wolfsbane scrape along her ribs, not deep, but it got in. Memory snapped into place, a sting under her right side while she ran the ridge, so quick she had mistaken it for branch whip. A dart. They had been close enough to kiss her with poison and let distance do the rest. Nara cut the torn seam of Luna's shirt with 2 fast strokes. Listen to me. If you pass out, you may wake in the border watchtower, not this yard. Do you understand? Luna dragged her eyes up. Not chains. No chains? Nara said. But you are now a strategic incident. The phrase would have been insulting in any other mouth. Nara made it sound like a promise to keep facts straight. They carried Luna up the narrow stair in a wool cloak that smelled of smoke and pine resin. Wind punched through the arrow slits. Somewhere below, horns answered the earlier gate calls in shorter coded bursts. Patrol relays, search grid tightening. She should have felt trapped. Instead, she felt the first dangerous edge of relief, because these soldiers moved like people who expected the truth to matter later. The watchtower chamber held a narrow cot, a map table, 2 shuttered lamps, and windows on 3 sides where rain veiled the valley in silver-gray sheets. Nara set her down and secured the door with a bar from the inside, then turned when heavy steps sounded on the stair. No one announced him. Eric filled the doorway in dark cloak and wet leather, a bandage newly wrapped around one palm where she had not noticed injury before. He took one look at Luna on the cot and stopped so abruptly the guard behind him nearly collided with his back. His inhale was sharp enough to hear over the wind. Amber bled into his irises, brightening until they looked lit from within, and Luna felt a hard, undeniable pull low in her chest that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with recognition she had no language for. Nera went still, then bowed her head once. "My king." Eric did not answer her immediately. His gaze stayed locked on Luna's face, then dropped to the reopened wound at her shoulder, the wolfsbane burn at her ribs, the tremor she could not hide in her hands. The air seemed to tighten, charged and intimate, as if the room had shrunk to the distance between cot and threshold. "Everyone out," he said, voice rough with control. "Now." Boots moved at once, the door shut. The bar lifted, then fell again from the outside. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Luna could hear his pulse. She realized with a jolt she could hear her own answering it, rhythm sliding toward rhythm like matched gears finding lock. Heat pulsed beneath her skin, not fever, not poison, but a spreading current that chased cold from her fingers and lit every nerve awake. Her breath caught. His did too. He took one involuntary step forward, then another backward, as if dragged between instincts that wanted opposite things. No, not this. Not another bond with teeth in it, another collar written in sacred language, another powerful male saying fate and meaning choice. She gripped the blanket until her knuckles blanched and forced herself to meet his gaze head on. "Do not tell me this is mercy," she said. His jaw tightened. "It is not mercy." "Then what is it?" He shut his eyes for one brief second, then opened them with the predator still visible there and grief braided through it. "The gods are cruel with timing." She almost laughed again, wild at the edges. "I do not take orders from gods either." A broken sound escaped him, closer to a bitter exhale than humor. "That may be why you are still alive." The pull between them intensified, a deep thrum in her bones that answered the one in his stance, in his breath, in the minute shift of his hands as he fought the urge to reach for her. Desire came with it, swift and disorienting, tangled with terror so tightly she could not separate them. Her memories rose like iron from river mud, chain collars lined on hooks, auction bells, men calling ownership duty. Yet under that old dread another truth pressed in, non-trivial and relentless. He had stepped back. He was still stepping back. He lowered himself to one knee, bringing his eyes below hers, a king deliberately diminishing height so she could see his intent clearly. "Luna Bloodmoon," he said, each word formal as oathstone. "I know what this is. I know what it asks. Hear me before you decide whether to hate me for it." She could not speak. She nodded once. "You are mine only if you choose it." The sentence landed between them like a blade laid flat, dangerous and offered hilt first. "If you refuse, I will still keep Brennan's hands off you. I will still put law behind your safety. I will still open a road when you are healed and let you walk it with guards you select. I will not cage you to soothe my fear." Her throat burned. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I can force almost anything in this territory, and I am not forcing this." Silence stretched, dense as storm cloud. Through the window slit the valley horns sounded again, farther now, relay to relay. Somewhere men hunted cult couriers and locked gates and sharpened strategy around her name. In this room, the crux was smaller and harder. Trust offered by a king to a woman who had survived by trusting no one. Luna held his gaze while warmth and dread battled under her skin, while the old knot behind her ribs threatened to tighten forever or finally loosen. He did not move. He did not touch her. He waited, fierce and patient, like a wolf at the edge of firelight refusing to cross until invited. "Then prove it," Luna said, voice scraped thin. "The mark is open because I opened it. I will not carry your scent like a collar. and I will not be drugged or bound or prayed over by strangers while they decide what I am worth. Eric rose slowly, palms visible, the posture of a warrior entering range without a weapon. You set the terms. Captain Nera waits outside with a healer satchel. I can call her in, or I can do the stitching myself. No sedative unless you request it. No restraints at all. You may keep a blade in your hand while it happens. He glanced at the blood seeping through the linen at her shoulder and then back to her eyes. Wolfsbane in your ribs complicates clotting. Delay is the only choice that could kill you tonight. The practical bluntness landed harder than reassurance. She studied him for the polished manipulation she had learned to detect in men with rank. She found strain, hunger held on a chain, and a discipline as rigid as hers. You stitch, she said at last, door open. He nodded once and moved to the threshold, calling for boiled water, clean thread, and the tincture she had smelled in the yard. Nera entered first, set supplies on the map table, and gave Luna a searching look that asked a silent question. Luna answered with a small tilt of her chin. Stay close. Nera left the bar unfastened and stationed herself in the corridor where Luna could see one shoulder through the gap. By the time the storm thinned to a soft hiss against slate, Eric had stripped off his cloak, rolled his sleeves, and washed his hands in front of her with methodical care. He knelt beside the cot again, not touching. I need to examine the wound edges. May I? The courtesy unsettled her more than command would have. You may. His fingers were warm, calloused, and precise as he lifted the blood-heavy cloth. Pain flared white along her neck. She bit down on the inside of her cheek and tasted salt. He noticed anyway. You can curse me, he said quietly, thread passing through needle eye in one clean motion. It will not affect my pride. A ragged breath escaped her that was almost a laugh. I am conserving strength for more creative uses. Wise allocation. That scrap of dry humor lasted 3 heartbeats and was gone. He cleaned the reopened bite, irrigated the wolfsbane scrape, and began to stitch, each pass even and careful, no wasted pressure. As he worked, he recited law in the same steady tone, as if reading terms of treaty. Under Duskwalker Crown Code, Article 9, Subsection 4, any bonded pair may refuse cohabitation without penalty. Article 11. Refusal of mating rights cannot be used to strip personal property or movement rights. Article 12. The Crown may be challenged by blood petition if coercion is alleged. Article 12, Clause 7. You may name your own advocate, even against me. Luna stared at him, pain and disbelief braided tight. You memorized this for women you bite in alleys? His jaw flexed, thread pulling through skin with another measured draw. I memorized it after watching old kings ignore it. A beat passed. And because power without boundaries rots the man who holds it. The sentence struck somewhere beneath her anger, in a place she kept armored and unnamed. She looked toward the open door, at Nera's silhouette beyond it, then back at Eric's bent head and the controlled tremor at the base of his thumb each time the mate pull surged between them. He could have dismissed every witness and called it necessity. He could have overwhelmed her with aura, rank, or the simple fact of his greater strength. He did none of it. He asked. He waited. He bled restraint into every inch between them. Trust is how cages get padded, she thought, fierce and immediate. Trust is the soft cloth on iron bars. Keep your eyes open. Keep your exits counted. He is still a king, and kings survive by taking what they need. Yet another thought rose behind it, unwanted and stubborn. He is also the first king who offered me law before demand. When he tied off the final stitch, he set the needle down and sat back on his heels, giving her space before she had to ask. Done. The wolfsbane burn will ache through dawn. I am leaving this tincture, a clean wrap, and food if your stomach settles. He hesitated, then pulled a folded parchment from his inner pocket and placed it on the blanket near her hand, careful not to brush her skin. Signed rite of passage, sealed by my ring and Captain Nera as witness. When your fever breaks, if you still choose to go, this grants you crossing at any Duskwalker gate with escort of your choosing. She unfolded it with stiff fingers. Her name. Not stock, not servant, not incident. Luna Bloodmoon, written in a strong slanted hand and backed by the wolf crown seal in black wax. Her throat tightened painfully. Why? She whispered, still staring at the ink. Because choice cannot be real if the road is locked. He stood, gathered the bloody cloths, and moved toward the door. At the threshold, he paused without turning. I will take the floor outside this chamber tonight and the next two, in case Brennan's roots reach this tower. Captain Nera has command inside. If you call, she answers first. Then he looked back, amber darkening toward human brown as he forced his wolf down. No one enters without your consent. Not even me. He slept where he said he would, wrapped in a plain wool blanket on cold stone, back against the wall opposite her door, sword within reach and head tipped toward every sound on the stair. Luna woke twice before dawn and saw him still there. On the second waking, she opened the door a hand's width and found a tray set on the floor. Broth, bread, dried pear, fresh bandage roll, and a charcoal map of 3 routes out of the territory with patrol timings marked in Eric's script. No note, no plea, just options. 3 days passed before the summons came from Mooncourt, and each day bent one rule in her without quite breaking it. Eric asked permission to check her pulse at the wrist because wolfsbane could spike without warning. He stood back when she changed dressings, turning his face to the window until she said, "Done." He spoke only what mattered. Which scouts had intercepted Hollow Moon couriers, which servant tunnels were being searched, which names from the night market ledgers had already been pulled for protection. When she challenged him, he answered directly. When she went silent, he did not fill the room with speeches. On the 3rd morning, Nera arrived with court gray garments and an expression carved from duty. The elders demand formal review, she said. They can call it procedure while they test your right to stand unconfined. She glanced at Luna's shoulder where the new stitches crossed scar tissue from the old servant brand. You want armor under that dress? Luna touched the hidden writ tucked inside her bodice and lifted her chin. I want witnesses. Mooncourt sat in a circular hall of black cedar and moonstone, tiers rising around a central floor in concentric arcs like ripples frozen in wood. Torches burned smokeless blue. Rain light washed through the high slits, turning polished stone pale as bone. Every seat held rank, lineage, or old grievance in formal cloth. Every eye tracked Luna as she entered at Nera's side and stopped 2 paces behind Eric's right shoulder. Elder Marrow spoke first, silver hair coiled tight at her nape, voice carrying with ritual ease. The female known as Luna bears mixed sense, uncertain parentage, and contact with cult agents. Until Brennan Valewood is neutralized, containment is prudent. A murmur of assent moved through the tiers. Another elder leaned forward, rings flashing. Contaminated stock cannot be placed near Crown Command. Stock. In the bright court where law was carved into stone, they used the same word as the market below ground. Luna felt old fury rise, clean and cold, but Eric moved first. Steel rang as he drew his blade in one fluid arc and planted its tip against the court floor hard enough to crack the silence. Say that again, he said, quiet enough that everyone leaned in to hear. Call my protected citizen stock in my hall. No one spoke. His gaze swept the tiers, predator clear. Hear Crown judgment. Any hand raised against Luna Bloodmoon, any order issued to confine her without charge, any attempt to traffic or silence her under color of emergency will be prosecuted as treason. Brennan's doctrine fed on servant roots and titled cowardice. I will not host it under my own roof. The hall held its breath. Luna had seen men posture before. This was different. No performance, no glance to see who approved. A line drawn, then occupied. Elder Marrow recovered first. Your Majesty, emotion is not governance. Correct, Eric said. Law is. He turned slightly, enough to include Luna without exposing his back to the tears. You have a witness who identified courier routes and council-linked seals. You will hear her testimony with respect, or you will leave this chamber. Marrow's mouth thinned. If she lies, the valley burns. Luna stepped forward, voice steadier than she felt. If you keep dismissing servants as unclean, the valley burns anyway. You just call the fire tradition. A sharp intake rippled through the galleries. She expected censure. Instead, Eric's shoulder eased by a fraction, as if her words settled into place exactly where he had hoped. The shot came from above, a hiss like an angry snake cutting through torch crackle. Luna saw only a silver streak descending from the gallery shadows. Eric pivoted and shoved her behind him in the same motion he half-shifted, claws flashing at his fingertips, canines lengthening as the bolt struck high in his shoulder with a sickening thud. He did not fall. He roared a command that shook dust from rafters. Seal the galleries, alive if possible. Guards surged. A second figure lunged from behind a carved screen toward the side exit, dagger up. Nira intercepted with brutal efficiency, driving the attacker to the floor and wrenching the blade away while two sentries pinned his arms. The archer tried for another bolt and caught Joran's tackle at the waist, both men crashing into the front rail. Wood splintered. The bow skidded across the stone. Within seconds, the gallery was a knot of controlled violence and shouted orders, then the hard clack of restraints. Eric snapped the bolt shaft short, blood darkening his court black, and turned to Luna as if nothing else in the hall existed. Look at me. She did, breath ragged. Are you hit? No. Good. He exhaled once, relief and fury braided together, then addressed the chamber at full command. You wanted evidence of infiltration. It just fired from your own gallery. No one argued containment after that. When healers pressed toward him, Eric waved them back until he had crossed the floor and taken Luna's hand in full view of every elder, every captain, every servant attendant lining the walls. He placed her at his right side, where only ranked blood or chosen equal stood during judgment, and kept her there while the court clerk recorded emergency decrees. Seizure of Hollow Moon assets, immediate audits of servant routes, protected status for all market laborers pending review, and warrants for every name Luna gave from the alcove where she had overheard her sale. By dusk, the hall emptied into a courtyard washed clean by fresh rain. Eric stood under the eaves while a healer finally bound his shoulder, face pale from blood loss, but posture unbent. Luna watched him wince once and hide it, watched him sign orders one-handed, watched him ask Nira first whether Luna had eaten, slept, or wanted the hearing record copied for her personal archive. The knot behind Luna's ribs did not vanish. It loosened, one thread at a time. When he finished with the last decree, he crossed to her and stopped at that careful distance he always left unless invited closer. I meant what I said in there, he told her, voice roughened by pain. Protection is not debt. You owe me nothing for doing my duty. Luna looked at the blood seeping through fresh bandage, at the court doors where elders had flinched when he named her citizen, at her own hand still marked by old scars and new ink from signing testimony beside a king who had made room for her voice. She did not have trust yet. She had something harder earned and more honest. The beginning of it. I am not ready for promises, she said. His mouth softened at one corner, tired but real. Then give me terms. She held his gaze and, for the first time since the river, let her guard lower by a single deliberate inch. "No cages," she said. "No hiding me when it is dangerous. If Brennan comes, I stand where decisions are made." Eric bowed his head, not as ruler to subject, but as one fighter recognizing another. "Agreed. Agreed." The word had barely settled between them when the courtyard doors slammed open and Joran strode through rain spray, chest heaving, one hand braced against the frame as if he had run the whole lower stair without stopping. He bowed to Eric, then to Luna, urgency stripping ceremony from his voice. "The gallery archer is dead, my king. Not from the tackle." He bit through a poison bead hidden in a tooth. "The second attacker is alive, but he keeps repeating one phrase and nothing else." Joran swallowed, then looked directly at Luna. "He says, 'Last royal vein for the hollow moon.'" Cold moved down her spine in a clean line. Eric's expression hardened into command. "War room. Now." The keep's corridors smelled of wet wool, lamp smoke, and iron from newly drawn weapons. Servants pressed against walls to clear their path. Guards doubled at each intersection with spears angled low, and eyes tracking every doorway. In the war room, maps lay weighted by daggers and stone markers. Luna's blood-stained bundle was gone from the center table where she had left it days ago. In its place stood 3 sealed packets, a confiscated ledger wrapped in oilcloth, and a small black mineral shard that seemed to drink the firelight instead of reflecting it. Nera entered behind them, helm tucked under one arm. "Interrogation notes," she said, tapping the packets. "We also recovered these from the dead archer's sleeve." She pushed the ledger toward Luna. "Recognize the hand?" Luna flipped it open. She recognized the slanted numerals immediately, the habit of crossing sevens with a heavy line, the coded abbreviations used in the warrens to hide human cargo inside grain inventories. Her stomach turned. "This is night market notation," she said. "See here, cask 12, winter roots, 3 crates. That means 3 women moved through cellar route 12 under root sacks. And this mark," she pointed to a crescent carved beside a date, "means royal line suspected." They were tagging bloodlines like livestock. Eric leaned over the table, one hand planted by her shoulder but not touching. "Read the next column." She did. "Eclipse consignment. Transfer complete on servant roads. Payment to BV." Silence snapped tight. "Brennan Valewood," Eric said, voice flat with contained fury. "Not rumor, not proxy. Him." Luna had heard the name in whispers traded over wash basins and butcher blocks, always followed by lowered voices and crossed fingers. Brennan, who preached purity to hungry men. Brennan, who told neglected sons they were born to reclaim power, stolen by soft kings and tainted blood. Brennan, who recruited from debt pits by promising dignity and delivered chains with better branding. Nera set down the black shard with 2 fingers, as if handling venom. "Null stone, cut from old temple veins. Our mages confirmed it suppresses bond resonance in a narrow radius. Used in ritual circles, it can sever pack link signals long enough to cause command failure." Her gaze shifted to Luna. "And according to the captive, Valewood wants your blood on it during the eclipse." Luna felt Eric go still beside her. Joran broke the silence. "There is more. We intercepted forged decrees stamped with a counterfeit crown seal. They name King Eric architect of an emergency bond cleansing rite and authorize mass detainment in 3 territories. If those orders spread during panic, neighboring packs will mobilize before they verify anything. A scheme wide enough to drown whole valleys in distrust. Use her blood to break bonds. Use forged law to make Eric the villain. Let frightened packs tear each other apart while Brennan claimed he had warned them first." "He does not only want me dead," Luna said quietly. "He wants the idea of me erased. If I live and stand beside the crown, his doctrine collapses." Eric turned to her then, amber deepening as the predator in him surfaced, not toward her, but around her, like a drawn perimeter. He will not touch you. She met his gaze. He already has, through every tunnel he bought and every servant he priced. For a breath, his control looked like a blade at full strain. Then he nodded once. Then we cut out the tunnels. By the second night after the court attack, the keep had become a fortress within a fortress. Gate lists were rewritten every watch. Supply wagons were broken down axle by axle. Anyone entering from the low roads passed scent checks, oath checks, and mirror checks for glamours. Eric sent coded dispatches to 2 neighboring alphas and the Mountain Tribunal, including copies of the forged decrees before rumor could outrun truth. One reply came before dawn from the eastern cliffs, acknowledged, verifying. The second arrived at midday, cautious and cold, requesting independent proof before committing troops. The third did not come at all. Pressure accumulated like storm weight. Luna spent those hours in the records chamber with Nera and 2 scribes, translating market codes into names, routes, and hidden storage sites. She identified 3 cellar mouths masked as vinegar depots, a disused drainage shaft beneath the old tannery, and the council wrist braid she had seen in the alcove the night she ran. Every detail she offered drew another circle on the map, and each circle overlapped the same central corridors leading toward the Moon Temple Ridge. Eric entered at intervals with updates, shoulder freshly bound, jaw darkened by exhaustion. He did not acknowledge. He never took the chair nearest her unless she gestured. He never read over her shoulder without warning. Once, when her hand cramped so badly she dropped the quill, he set a heated stone wrapped in cloth beside her wrist and stepped back before she looked up. The small care broke her concentration harder than any argument. I am tired of reading danger in every kindness. I am tired of the arithmetic where safety always carries hidden cost. He stands close and asks before touching, and my body still flinches as if memory outranks evidence. I want to trust him because wanting rest feels holy after years of vigilance, but I know how quickly women are punished for believing too soon. I am not a girl in a market pen now. I am witness, target, and maybe heir to a name men kill to control. If I choose him, it must be as equal, not shelter. If I reject him, it must be from truth, not fear dressed as pride. Right now, I can only do the next honest thing. Keep my eyes open and keep speaking. Near dusk, while rain thickened into silver sheets beyond the arrow slits, Nera returned from the lower gate with mud to her knees and anger sharpened into clarity. Refugee caravan from the Western Marsh tried entry under famine petition. Papers looked legitimate until we checked the wax. Hidden beneath the seal was hollow moon dust. She set a cloth bundle on the table and unfolded it. Inside lay 6 throat pins, each a plain iron crescent with a hollow channel for poison paste. Not starving families, sleeper cadre. Eric's hand tightened on the map edge. Casualties? 2 guards with minor wounds, all infiltrators contained. Nera looked to Luna. One asked for you by name before we gagged him. The room went colder despite the fire. Joran arrived moments later with another report. 3 warehouse fires set simultaneously along the river quarter, each in properties tied to former servant brokers now under Crown seizure. Diversion, not destruction. Draw patrols outward. Thin, the keep. Test response times. Brennan is counting our steps, Eric said. He wants us reactive. Luna traced the circles on the map, then tapped the Moon Temple Ridge again. He also wants us away from this line. Every route bends here. If he cannot get me through a gate, he will pull me through legacy roads beneath the keep. Nera swore softly. The old servant conduits. Eric looked at Joran. Lock every grate from the inside. Post wolves at each junction. Joran hesitated, then nodded. There is one conduit we cannot seal quickly, the archive shaft behind this wing. Masonry collapsed years ago. Then we hold it with steel, Eric said. Night settled full and hard. Wind drove rain against shutters in uneven bursts that sounded, at first, like fists. Luna had just finished signing the final witness statement when the first alarm bell struck from below, not the high gate bell, but the low service iron used only for interior breach. 1 strike, 2, 3 in rapid succession. Nera was already moving. Archive shaft. The corridor outside erupted into motion. Guards ran downslope in coordinated pairs, boots pounding stone. Eric drew his sword one-handed, favoring his wounded shoulder, but losing none of his speed. "Luna with me," he ordered, then corrected himself mid-stride, voice cutting through the chaos. "Luna, choose. Stay in the wardroom with 4 guards, or come behind my flank to the second line." "Second line," she said without pause. He accepted it with a tight nod. They reached the archive landing to find smoke curling under the lower door, acrid and metallic. Not fire from timber. Burn paste from alchemical charges. A guard staggered up the stair coughing, face gray. They threw flash powder through the grate, 3 masked. Maybe 4. Servant livery. Servant livery. Brennan's cruelty was always precise, Eric signaled. 2 wolves in partial shift dropped low and took position by the hinge side. Nera counted with her fingers. On 3, they breached. The door slammed inward. Smoke billowed. Figures moved in the haze, fast and disciplined, black scarves over mouths, crescent pins catching lamplight. The clash was immediate and tight, too close for sweeping strikes. Steel rang. A masked attacker lunged for Luna with a hooked restraint pole meant to trap wrists without cutting flesh. Eric intercepted, blade knocking the pole aside with a hard crack. Nera drove her shoulder into a second attacker, pinning him to the wall long enough for Yoren to bind his hands. 1 infiltrator broke past the melee and flung a clay capsule toward the stair. It shattered, releasing a choking blue vapor that burned eyes and throat. Luna dropped to 1 knee behind a pillar, sleeve over mouth, vision blurring. Through the haze, she saw a gloved hand reach for her ankle. She kicked hard, connected, scrambled backward, and collided with Eric's boots. He hauled her upright by the forearm, then released as soon as she found her footing. "Stay on me," he said, voice roughened by smoke. A horn blasted from the outer yard, then another, farther off, from the Temple Road. Nera dragged the last masked attacker into the lamplight and tore away his scarf. The man was young, maybe 20, eyes fever-bright with fanatic certainty. He smiled through split lip and said, almost gently, "Too late. The king guards his keep while Valewood takes the moon." Eric froze for a fraction of a second. "Where?" The captive laughed once, then bit down. Nera jammed her fingers at his jaw hinge, forcing it open before he could crush another poison bead, but he had already swallowed enough to send him into convulsions. He gasped one final phrase between clenched teeth. "Eclipse altar. He has your elders. He has the circle. He has the Blood Moon heir's name." The words dropped into the room like a dropped blade. Outside, the Temple Road horn changed pattern to full emergency recall. Long, long, short. The signal for ritual site compromised. Smoke still burned Luna's lungs, yet her mind sharpened with terrifying clarity. Brennan had never intended this breach to succeed. It was a pinning strike, meant to hold Eric at the keep, while the true operation began at the altar with witnesses, null stone, and stolen authority. She looked at Eric, at the blood seeping fresh through his shoulder bandage, at the hard decision already forming behind his eyes. "If he starts the rite before we get there," she said, voice hoarse, "he can fracture 3 territories in 1 night." Eric turned to Nera. "Riders in 2 minutes. Seal the keep. No one in or out without your word." Then he faced Luna. Rain and horn calls and smoke closing around them, the mate pull between them suddenly threaded with war. "This is the critical line," he said. "If you come, he will target you first." Luna wiped blue residue from her mouth and held his gaze. He already does. Move. The emergency horn sounded again, and this time the entire keep answered. The emergency horn sounded again, and this time the entire keep answered, as Eric drove them down the rain-slick switchback toward Moon Temple Ridge. 12 riders stretched in a hard line behind him, torches hooded against the wind, so only brief amber flashes marked their descent. Luna rode between Eric and Nera on a lean gray mare that hated the weather and loved speed, her thighs burning from the pace, smoke still scraping her lungs with each breath. The valley below looked split in two. Keep lights clustered in disciplined grids, temple heights pulsing with erratic silver fire that climbed and vanished, as if lightning had been trapped under stone and could not decide where to strike. 20 minutes into the climb, they passed the first bodies on the road, not dead, stunned and bound in courier cloaks, Duskwalker scouts who should have held this approach. Their captors had used restraint hooks and null dust, methods designed to disable without noise, designed for timing. Brennan had counted patrol intervals, shift fatigue, rain visibility, every practical weakness that power-hungry men called opportunity, and everyone else called betrayal. They crested the final turn into the temple basin, and the world opened into ruinous ceremony. The Moon Temple stood in a ring of broken columns above a stepped amphitheater cut into black rock, old enough that even the pack histories disagreed on who had built it first. Tonight it blazed with stolen ritual. Iron braziers spat blue-white flame. Nullstone shards had been hammered into the altar floor in a 6-point lattice, and banners bearing the hollow moon hung from the colonnade where Duskwalker standards should have flown. 2 elders knelt at the dais edge with their hands bound behind them. 3 temple wardens lay disarmed but alive beside the lower steps. Around the circle, a crowd of cloaked figures held torches too still to be frightened refugees. Sleeper adherents. Dozens. At the altar's center stood Brennan Valewood. He was taller than she expected, spare and rigid, his hair iron dark at the temples, his ceremonial coat stripped down to plain black, as if rank itself were a contamination. Silver runes wound up both forearms in tight geometric bands. In his left hand, he held a nullstone blade dull as river slate. In his right, he held a wax-sealed decree bearing a counterfeit wolf crown. When he saw Luna ride into torchlight, his mouth curved with hungry certainty. "There," he called, voice amplified by the stone bowl of the basin. "The final fraud arrives under guard of the tyrant who bit her. Witness your king bringing blood to the altar he denies." Chaos detonated before Eric could answer. Hidden archers in the upper colonnade loosed silver-threaded nets at the riders while cult blades surged from both flanks. Wolves in partial shift met them with snapping force, boots skidding on wet stone, steel clashing in bursts of sparks and rain. Nera took one netting line across her shield and cut through it in 2 strokes, shoving Luna's mare clear of a falling torch. Joran vaulted from saddle to stair rail and drove 2 cultists back with blunt guard strikes, taking 1 slash across his forearm without losing ground. Eric roared command over the din. "Outer ring! Lock it! No one reaches her." He charged straight for the altar steps, aura rolling off him in a pressure wave that made 3 cultists falter, yet the nullstone lattice answered with a low pulse that hit like a hammer behind Luna's eyes. Packlink signals dropped to static. Coordinated calls became shouted guesses. Wolves staggered, disoriented for a heartbeat that cost blood and footing. Brennan lifted his blade and drove it point first into a groove cut through the altar. The lattice flashed, a silver arc whipped from stone to stone and snapped around Luna's mare's forelegs. The animal screamed and reared. Luna hit the ground hard enough to rattle her teeth. 2 masked adherents were on her at once with restraint poles, one hooking her elbow, the other pressing a null collar ring toward her throat. The old panic came fast and bright, memory and present collapsing into one narrow truth. Not again. Move now. Breathe through pain. Find leverage. You are on stone, not in a pen. Your left hand is free. His weight is forward. Take the joint, not the blade. Do not wait for rescue and call that survival. You have waited your whole life for men to decide whether you are worth keeping. Choose yourself in front of all of them. Choose where you stand. Choose what your blood means. If you die silent, his story survives you. If you stand and speak, every servant in this valley hears a different law for the first time. Stand. She drove her head backward into the nearer attacker's nose, twisted under the restraint hook, and slammed her palm into the second man's throat just enough to break his grip. Nera's sword flashed past her shoulder and cleared space. Eric reached for Luna from 2 steps up, voice ragged with urgency. Back line, now. Luna met his gaze, shook her head once, and ran toward the center of the ritual circle. He cursed and lunged after her, but Brennan triggered another null pulse that split the ring with crackling light. Eric hit the barrier and staggered, half-shift forcing through under strain, claws scoring sparks as he braced against an invisible wall. Luna, do not cross. She crossed. The circle's edge bit like winter iron as she stepped over it. Every sigil ignited beneath her boots in ghost silver lines that raced outward along the cut channels. Brennan smiled with relief so pure it looked devotional. Thank you, he whispered. At last, obedience. Luna drew the small utility blade from her belt, sliced her own palm, and lifted her bleeding hand over the altar groove before he could seize her wrist. Her voice carried clear across the basin, stronger than she felt, stronger than fear. My name is Luna Bloodmoon. I was sold, branded, and counted as stock in your ledgers. I am the line you erased and the witness you failed to kill. She pressed blood into the central rune and altered the next phrase, using the invocation she had heard once from her mother years ago in a cellar lullaby she had thought was nonsense. Words that tasted of moonwater and oathstone and home. The lattice jerked sideways as if a current had been forced into a new channel. Brennan's smile vanished. No, he snapped. You do not know the sequence. I know enough. Silver fire climbed her arm to the shoulder scar where servant iron had once burned, then split into a web above the basin, not downward into the null stone drain Brennan had prepared, but outward into the valley like branching lightning drawn in careful geometry. One by one, figures in the crowd cried out and grabbed at their skin as ghost silver runes surfaced along wrists, throats, and jawlines, the hidden oath marks of Hollow Moon adherents answering the redirected blood command. The markings spread beyond the temple floor. On the upper path, 2 late-arriving pilgrims lit with the same runes and froze in place as sentries turned on them. Brennan backed a step, then another, face contorting with disbelief. Stop it. You are binding the wrong people. I am revealing the right ones, Luna said. She turned, blood still falling from her palm into the carved channels, and shouted to the entire basin. Witness before vengeance. No summary killings. Check every mark against names from servant roots. Free the trafficked first. Hear them first. The command rippled through the stunned pack ranks. Nera seized it instantly, voice cutting like a bell. You heard her. Live captures unless lethal threat. Mark and separate, all branded. Eric slammed his forearm into the barrier again, forcing a crack through the null pulse with sheer alpha force and fury. The field shuddered. Joran and 2 wolves hit it from the flanks. It collapsed in a shower of pale sparks. Brennan recovered with fanatic speed. He ripped the null stone blade free and lunged straight at Luna, spitting rain and rage. Blood queens are a plague. Fear is the only lawful order. Luna did not retreat. She caught his knife wrist with both hands, one over rune, one over tendon, and drove every thread of the royal current still burning through her into his marked skin. Silver flame burst along his forearm bands. The runes blackened, then peeled away in molten strips of light. Brennan screamed and tried to wrench free. Eric hit him from the side, disarming him with a brutal twist that sent the null blade spinning across wet stone. Brennan stumbled but kept fighting, clawing for Luna's throat with his free hand. She pivoted, shoulder to chest, and drove him backward step by step toward the altar core where his consecrated nullstone stood like a dark tooth from the center groove. He saw it too late. "You will crown another tyrant," he hissed, heels striking the stone base. Luna held him there with both hands braced against his chest, rain running into her eyes, blood and silver light dripping from her fingers onto the crack she had opened in his ritual. "No," she said, voice steady as a verdict. "I end yours." She shoved. Brennan slammed into the nullstone pillar. The fracture line raced through it in a bright, jagged seam. For one suspended beat, the basin went silent. Then backlash fire erupted inward and up, a column of white-silver heat that swallowed stone, coat, and creed in a single violent bloom. When the light collapsed, the pillar was shattered into smoking fragments, and Brennan Valewood was gone. The remaining cultists broke. Some dropped weapons and fell to their knees. Others ran for the colonnade and were tackled before they reached the stairs, their oath runes burning unmistakable under rain. Nera's teams moved with ruthless clarity, binding wrists, tagging marks, separating coerced laborers from armed cadres exactly as Luna had ordered. Elder Marrow, hands newly freed, stared at Luna in open shock, as if seeing not contamination, but authority she could no longer deny. Eric reached Luna at last and stopped one pace away, chest heaving, eyes wild with relief and terror, and reverence braided together. He looked at the blood on her palm, the glow fading from her skin, the broken altar behind her, and bowed his head in front of the entire basin before he spoke. "By witness of moon and pack," he said, rough and clear. The decisive hand was hers. Around them, wolves and wardens and freed servants watched the rain wash Brennan's ash into the temple drains, while ghost silver marks still burned on every hidden oath-bearer in sight. Luna stood in the center of the ruined circle, shaking and upright, and did not lower her gaze. She stood in the center of the ruined circle, shaking and upright, and did not lower her gaze. Eric stepped closer, stopping where rain ran off his jaw and darkened the stone between them. Around the basin, bound cultists knelt under guard while freed servants huddled in cloaks near the lower braziers, watching with the stunned stillness of people waiting to learn which law would rule them now. Nera held the line at the altar steps, blade down but ready. Joran, bleeding through a wrapped forearm, gave Luna a tight nod that said he was still standing. Eric lifted both hands, empty. Luna Bloodmoon. Before Moon, Pack, Council, and those Brennan trafficked, I ask, not command. Will you accept my mark, freely, as equal claim and sovereign bond? The wind shifted. Clouds tore apart above the basin and pale moonlight spilled over broken columns and wet stone. Luna could feel the old servant scar at her shoulder throbbing under torn fabric, could feel the fresh cut in her palm still stinging where royal silver had answered her blood. She looked to the freed servants first, because she would not build a crown on their silence. "If I do this," she said, voice carrying, "it will never be used to cage anyone, not me, not you, not again." A woman from the lower steps, gray-haired and narrow as a reed, lifted her chin. "Then choose it for yourself, my queen." The title hit Luna like a struck bell. Not stock, not incident. Queen. She faced Eric again. "One condition added to mine. You offered law when you could have offered force. Keep doing that, even when it costs you." His answer came without hesitation. "I swear it on my name and on the throne." He removed his signet and set it at her feet, then knelt on both knees in the rain, baring his throat and the vulnerable line where neck met shoulder. A king lowering himself before witnesses, a king making refusal possible. Luna stepped into him and touched his face, letting him see the final decision before she spoke. Yes, I choose you. A low murmur moved through wolves and wardens like wind through pine. Eric rose only enough to meet her height. May I? Yes. He brushed wet hair from her left shoulder with reverent care, exposing the old brand scar and the place where she had cut open his first desperate bite. His mouth hovered there for one suspended breath. Then his teeth sank in, precise and sure, at the junction of neck and shoulder. Pain flashed sharp, clean, and immediate. It opened into heat so sudden her knees softened, then widened into a rushing current that spread along her spine and through her chest, not erasing what had been done to her, but rethreading it. The scar that had once marked ownership burned, then steadied, and the burn became pulse, and the pulse became recognition. A gold-silver flare rippled over both of them, visible even in moonlight, threading from his skin to hers in bright lines that wrapped and settled. Luna heard his breath hitch against her shoulder, heard the restraint in him break into devotion without becoming hunger that took. When he released her, his forehead fell to hers. Mine, he whispered, rough and shaken. Luna held his face between her blood-warm hands. Yours, she whispered back. By choice. He trembled once. Mate. The word moved through the bond like a struck chord. She felt him then, not as invasion but as open door. The night he found her in the tannery lane and knew 1 second too late what the bite would mean. The 3 nights on stone outside her chamber, the fear he had hidden every time she stepped beyond arm's reach, because fear had never again been allowed to look like command. She drew him down by the back of his neck. My turn. Eric went still, then bowed his head, exposing the base of his neck where shoulder and spine met. Consent returned, mirrored and clear. Luna bit him there, hard enough to claim, careful enough to honor. He gasped and gripped her waist. Not to control, to anchor. Pain answered in her own body through the bond, then transformed into a deep, steady thrum that seemed to settle both their hearts into one shared cadence. His scent wrapped around her, cedar and rain and iron, while hers rose to meet it. Wild mint, smoke, and moonlit stone. The bond closed with a final bright pulse that rolled across the basin. Several wolves dropped to one knee on instinct, then looked up, startled by their own bodies answering new authority. Luna released him and rested her brow at his throat. Eric's arms came around her fully at last, careful and fierce, holding as if he had wanted to do this since the watchtower and had refused himself until now. Rain softened to mist. The basin quieted. Against her hair he whispered, no cage, no chains, only chosen. She smiled into his skin, exhausted and steady, chosen and never hidden again. By dawn, they stood in the keep tribunal chamber with smoke-washed windows open to cold morning air. The aftermath did not wait for rest. It demanded records, witnesses, and names. Luna sat at the high table beside Eric, not behind him, while scribes cataloged every seized item aloud. The night market ledger with coded cargo lines, the 6 hollow crescent poison pins, the counterfeit decrees stamped with false crown wax, the black nullstone shard from the war table, and the poison tooth bead recovered from the archive attacker's jaw. She ordered each piece logged under public seal and copied for the Mountain Tribunal. Nera oversaw chain of custody herself, signing each transfer with clipped precision. External reports arrived in sequence and were read before the chamber. The Eastern Cliffs Alpha confirmed immediate border cooperation and sent 40 guards to assist with route sweeps. The cautious Second Territory acknowledged proof after receiving rune-mark testimonies and released detained travelers unharmed. The third territory's silence was resolved when a burned courier reached the gate with the original dispatch case. Hollow Moon riders had cut the relay road, and the delay had been sabotage, not refusal. Their Alpha's reply came by noon, brief and formal. Joint sanctions approved. Elder Marrow, pale and stripped of ceremonial rings, asked leave to speak. I saw warning signs in servant petitions and called them disorder. I was wrong. She did not ask forgiveness. I resign my vote. Luna regarded her for a long moment, then said, "Resignation is easy. Service is harder. You will chair restitution hearings under my authority, and every trafficked worker speaks first." Marrow bowed her head and accepted. Halveth was brought in at midday, wrists bound, mud still on his boots from the tannery shaft. Beside him stood the older council-braided broker Luna had overheard in the alcove. She identified both, voice unwavering, and watched the clerk record the charges: trafficking, conspiracy with Hollow Moon, attempted ritual abduction. Neither met her eyes, neither walked free. Joran's arm was stitched and splinted. By evening, Eric named him Captain of the Temple Watch for holding the line under Null Pulse. Nera accepted command of the new Sanctuary Guard, tasked with escorting runaways, not returning them. On the next full moon, wolves filled the restored temple basin, no hollow banners left, only Duskwalker standards and plain white cloth for the houses Brennan had emptied. Luna wore dark silver trimmed in black, the mark at her shoulder visible by her own choice. Eric stood beside her in formal leathers without crown, because they had agreed the vow came before the symbol. Before pack and tribunal, Eric spoke first. "I remain Alpha King by oath and duty. Luna Bloodmoon stands as Queen Consort by equal claim and independent law. Her rulings on sanctuary, debt servitude, and lineage rights carry crown force." Luna lifted the rebuilt signet, now engraved with both wolf and moon, and set it into shared wax on the charter table. "Debt routes are abolished. The border fortress is converted to school and open tribunal. No person may be branded property under any house in this territory." Cheers broke, then rose into howls that shook the columns. Wolves bowed row by row, first to Eric, then to Luna, then to both together. When the rite ended, he took her hand and did not let go as they walked down the temple steps into a valley no longer ruled by fear dressed as order. Their bond sat warm and settled beneath her skin. Not a chain, not a wound, but a chosen thread that held. Under a full moon and a watching pack, Luna Bloodmoon walked forward as queen, mate, and law, and Eric walked with her.